When I was a kid, everybody got measles. You develop lifelong immunity. That meant that you were protected from measles for the rest of your life.
Here is Ted Kuntz, the president of Vaccine Choice Canada and National Citizen Inquiry. He's here to speak to us about the rise of measles in Canada. Mr. Ted Kuntz, what's going on, brother?
Well, Nico, first of all, nice to see you. It's been a long time. How's that fathering going?
Lack of sleep is great. Lack of sleep is great. Lack of sleep is great. It's very interesting to see him change that much in 2 months already.
It's pretty miraculous, isn't it?
Yeah, he likes to headbutt things now. He's headbutting my wife and the boobs. He's like, give me boobies. He's just
It's an MMA move.
He's
like an aggressive little man. Yeah. I don't know where he got that from.
Yeah. Hey, Ted, how's it going?
Hi, Rob. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to.
This conversation started because you BCC'd me on a letter that you sent out to the government of Alberta. You and I have recorded a bunch of content together.
Yeah.
We spoken about what you do as the president of Vaccine Choice Canada, and measles is something that you and I have spoken about. It's something that's in the news all the time now, and people are freaking out because there's measles cases and people refuse to vaccinate their children, and we're all being called all the names in the world. But you contacted the Alberta government. Why'd you do that?
Well, Alberta MP or MLA Diana Batten had written, I think, a Twitter post where she was encouraging Albertans to write a letter to the Alberta government to have the Minister of Health fired because there are so many measles cases in Alberta. And as soon as I saw that, I knew that Diane Batten hadn't done her homework. She actually doesn't understand the situation with measles. And I thought before she puts herself into even more hot water, maybe she needs to have some information. So I wrote her a very, I think, a respectful letter. And I said, there's a fair bit of information about the measles vaccine in particular, but all vaccines that you probably need to understand as you figure out your stance on the so-called measles crisis. And so I simply explained to her that the increase in measles that's happening not only in Alberta but globally is not because of vaccine hesitancy, it's because of vaccine failure. And what most people don't understand is that when children contracted measles when I was a kid, everybody got measles. You develop lifelong immunity. And so that meant that you were protected from measles for the rest of your life. The vaccine is a poor excuse for natural immunity. And what happens with the immunity provided by the measles vaccine is that it's temporary. It wanes over time. And I would suggest that most adults no longer have immunity to measles. The other thing that happened is, the measles vaccine was effective in preventing the outbreak of measles in childhood. But what it's done is it's increased it in adults and it's increased it in infants, both populations where the risk is actually greater than if you experience measles as a child. If you experience measles as a child, it's a pretty innocuous illness. I mean, it has a 4 to 6 day period of symptoms. It doesn't require treatment other than rest, fluids, and the love of mom and dad. But, the pharmaceutical industry has done a pretty good job of terrorizing people that measles is this terrible killer disease. In third world countries where they have very poor nutrition, where they have, they don't have clean drinking water, they're vitamin A deficient, measles is a more serious condition. But in developed countries like Canada, the United States, and other developed countries, measles is not an issue. It is not life-threatening. What most people don't understand is the mortality of measles declined 98.5% before the vaccine was introduced in 1963. And so there's a narrative they're telling about how dangerous measles is, which is not true for Canadian children. It might be true if you're living in a little village in Africa where you don't have food and you don't have clean water. But then what happens is any illness is dangerous to those children because they have a very poor immune system. And so they're using a narrative that doesn't apply to Canadians. They're actually lying and deceiving Canadians. But the other thing that MLA, and I also wrote a similar letter to a federal MP, Michelle Rempel, because she too wrote an article in recent weeks talking about how there's outbreak of measles and somebody's got to pay for this. What most people don't understand, including doctors, is that no vaccine on the childhood schedule was properly tested for safety against a true placebo. So there is no evidence, first of all, that the vaccine is safe. And when you actually look at the evidence, when you look at the data, particularly, the best data that we have, because the Canadian statistics are very poor. If you look at the data out of the United States, out of the vaccine adverse events reporting system, the numbers there are pretty disconcerting. Let me just find some numbers here for you. As of June the 27th, 2025, there's been 117,000 reports of reaction to the measles vaccine, including hospitalizations, injuries, and deaths. And of that number, they identify 574 deaths as a result of the measles vaccine, 9,000 hospitalizations, 2,225 related disabilities. The other thing, though, Nico and Rob, is that a 2010 study in the United States revealed that only 1% of vaccine adverse events are reported by the VAERS system. So those numbers could easily be 100 times those numbers, which would mean 57,000 deaths from the measles vaccine.
And right now you're looking at what, there's 1,807 confirmed cases of measles in Alberta. The survival rate for unvaccinated people, you're looking at 90 to 95%. And I'm ready to bet that those people that are part of the 5 to 10% have comorbidity problems. They don't have strong immune system in the first place. Because as you said, how many stories have I been told from people from your generation saying that when they were young, they had measles party? Everybody would get together and everybody would get sick. The kids would be sick for a few days, and then that'd be the end of the day. Just like me, we had those chicken pox parties when I was young, right? And that's just what we did to build natural immunity. And I just wanted to mention too, and what's interesting about what you're talking about is that it's not a liberal versus conservative, because what's her name? Michelle Rempel, she's a conservative.
Right. So, I mean, some interesting, as you're saying this. So just some background for context. So I'm not anti-vaccine in any way. I would say I have some serious concerns about the mRNA vaccine, and I'm absolutely against forcing anyone to take any drug that they don't want to take in order to participate in society. That's the hard line for me. But so I'm not necessarily opposed to taking, say, a measles vaccine, almost ideologically opposed or anything. But it's interesting as you're talking here. And you're saying, the measles isn't that, the death rate isn't that much. That just doesn't really, it's not that I disbelieve you or anything. It's just, that's certainly not the narrative that we're told. And so as you're talking, I kind of just did a little bit of my own research, as we sometimes do on the show here. And it says that, and this is from Wikipedia, so clearly, if anything, if they're going to lie anywhere, it's on the other end. They said that it is 1 to 2 deaths in 1,000 for people that are infected. And if you plug that in, that gives you a mortality rate of 0.002%, which means people who get it have a 99.9992 or 998, whatever, you know what I'm talking about. But really, so essentially, yeah, this is actually, and I'm almost surprised here. I'm like, holy hell. That is not what I thought the mortality rate of measles would have been. I mean, I never looked it up before, but just what we're told is that it's much higher than that. That's really interesting.
Rob, you're absolutely true. What you're saying is absolutely true, is that there's a narrative out there that measles is a killer. And what I can tell you is that the likelihood of a child dying from measles in Canada is virtually zero.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what that number is, 0.0002%. That's essentially zero.
There was an article that was in the Globe and Mail in 2018 written by Dr. Richard Shabazz, who was the former chief medical officer of Ontario. and he said that the risk of dying from measles in Canada is 1 every 100 years.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, of course, there are lots of things. I bet you going to work can carry, like, every day, just driving to work carries some form of a risk. There's a very low chance you might die in a car accident, right? So, like, that, like, to me, a number as low as 0.0002%, that's just within the risk that everyone has to take if they're going to get out of bed in the morning. That's not any type of risk that you should arrange your life to avoid.
But Rob, you're making a very good point that the perception people have, like if you were to do a survey of most Canadians and ask them how dangerous measles is, I would be willing to bet 80+% would say, "Oh boy, it's very dangerous. You have to get the vaccine."
That was me until 5 minutes ago.
But if you said to them, do you know anybody that died from measles? Well, they have one case in Canada that they claim was a measles death. I think it was in Winnipeg. But if you actually look at the medical evidence there, that was a child with severe comorbidities. Mm-hmm. And so the question that always needs to be asked is, did they die from measles or did they die with measles? Mm-hmm. And, so to claim it as a measles death, I would suggest is being dishonest. If it was an absolutely healthy child, okay, that's a whole different story. That's not the case. So you have one death that you're attributing to measles in Canada. And people are lighting their hair on fire. But I want to say that the situation is even more serious than that. There was a study that was done in 2020. It's called the Control Group Study that compared the risk of illness and death in the unvaccinated with the national mortality in the United States. And a mathematician analyzed the government's data. She was using their data. She wasn't taking it from anybody that you would say, "Oh my God, they're anti-vaccine." And she concluded that the risk of dying, if you're concerned about dying, the risk is more than 260 times higher from the measles vaccine than from contracting measles. More than 260 times.
Wow.
So if
that answers one of the questions we had. Basically, that's what Alberta Nan wanted to know. The real question is now compare natural contracted measles death to the measles vaccine death. Well, 260% more chances by that study right there.
So we're just putting this information out there now. We've just produced a postcard that we're going to start to distribute. And it shows that with every childhood vaccine, the risk of death is higher from vaccination than from non-vaccination. Every single one. And I think that when parents understand that's going to be a game changer, right? That if parents don't pause with that information, then they're not doing their homework.
Wow. Yeah, this is, I think there's just a lot of people who just have not heard these things.
Without a doubt. And what I can tell you is, I mean, we are heavily censored at Vaccine Choice Canada. And sure. It's been that way for at least 20 years. We can't post things on Facebook, for example. What I can tell you is that it was more than 20 years ago that I was approached by the Globe and Mail, who asked if I would write an article about my concerns about vaccination, because I lost a son to vaccine injury. Okay. And they gave me a half a page in the Globe and Mail. That would never happen today.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You know, if I'm going to get press, it's going to be Ted Kuntz, this rabid
anti-vaxxer, yeah,
who is a conspiracy theorist, as opposed to somebody who has spent 40 years researching this topic, because I needed to understand what happened to my son. And if you look at my library, 80% of the books in my library are about vaccines. People don't know that there are hundreds of books out there in the market that talk about the injuries, the vaccine injury, and they go back for 200 years. Doctors have been talking about the dangers of vaccination for 200 years. We shouldn't be injecting the kind of toxins that are in vaccines into our babies. I mean, it's you start to understand how the whole vaccine paradigm is ludicrous when you realize that we're injecting aluminum and mercury, which are neurotoxins, through a needle into our infants on the first day of life. You got to ask why.
You know, Ted, like you and I have been speaking about, we've known each other for a little while now. We've recorded a lot of content together, and No, one of the things you always say is that safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. And the fact that we're not allowed to question it is problematic. And this is, this is a type of conversation that Rob and I have all the time. As a conservative, he's a liberal. There's a lot of things we don't agree with. But one thing we do agree with is if you cannot question something, there's a problem.
Yeah.
You're hiding something. If you cannot question it, and this is the problem, and it blows my mind that the average individual out there does not see that as an issue where we are not allowed to question. We're not allowed to say no. We're not allowed to say, what if? Not even a debate. Like you won't see a debate on a prime time stage where people that are pro-vaccine and people that might be considered anti-vax or question that just question
it's not considered a valid question in society. Say the Overton window has shifted very aggressively since COVID on that.
No, you're absolutely right. And so when you can't ask the questions, you're not actually getting the information, and doctors can't ask the questions either. Like you use the mantra "safe and effective." That's not evidence-based statement. That's a marketing
or a faith-based statement almost.
And what you don't realize, or what most people don't realize, is that the measles vaccine, when it was licensed for use for safety, it was only monitored for 42 days, and the study only included 342 children. And that's the study that they use to tell you that vaccines are safe and effective. And I want to tell you that 42 days is one of the longest periods of safety monitoring of childhood vaccines. You know what the average length of monitoring of childhood vaccines are for safety? 4 days. So if the child dies in day 5, that's not included.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It won't be considered a vaccine injury if the child dies 6 days or 7 days or 8 days.
Exactly.
Well, I mean,
wise guy is bang on. Vaccine have become a religion, untouchable, and the word faith that you use is bang on. And I know that there's people that are going to push back, like what Bumpy's saying right now. Vaccines, like any pharmaceutical drug, have side effect. The biggest argument for vaccine would be the expanded lifespan in third world countries, and that you pretty much touched on that earlier, saying that measles in a third world country where they don't have vitamin A, they don't have access to clean water, clean food, is not the same thing as measles here in Canada where you're sick for 4 to 6 days.
And if we want to help those children in third world countries, why don't we provide them with clean water? Why don't we provide them with nutrition? Do you know there was a study by Dr. Peter Abbey, who was working with children in Africa, giving the DPT vaccine, and he did a study to prove the overall health benefits of the DPT vaccine. And do you know what he found? The children that received the DPT vaccine died at a rate of 5 times more than unvaccinated children.
Wow.
And he wrote a letter to the World Health Organization saying you have to stop giving that vaccine to African children. You're killing them. And what happened with that? Silence. Crickets.
Wow.
They still do it today.
And just to go back to Bumpy's question there, he said where vaccines, like any pharmaceutical drug, have side effects. But honestly, Bumpy, the authorities aren't even admitting that to these days.
That's
the problem, right? Like you're correct. They do have side effects because of course they do, because every drug, even, you could be the biggest pro-vaccine person, but when you won't even admit that there's side effects and will not allow us to discuss it, that's the kind of stuff that sets people's radar off, right? If there actually is something, if there's nothing to hide, then why are they hiding, right? Like everyone knows what that means. Everyone knows that if you have the right answer to a question, you're not afraid of you're not afraid of being questioned, right? Because you've got the solution. Here's the solution. Anyone banning someone from talking about it right away without knowing anything else, I've got to be, any rational thinking person is going to be very suspicious about that.
Well, Rob, let me give you a simple example of exactly what you're talking about. When you buy any pharmaceutical product at a pharmacy, what's in that product? A product monograph insert. And you pull it out, it's a little piece of paper, you unfold it, and if you actually read it, it will tell you what it's for, the ingredients, the contraindications, overdosing, all of that information so that you've got it. Have you ever seen one for a vaccine product?
No, that's a good point. And it's like
And there is they don't give it to you.
Wow. Is there? I assume there's some exemption in the law, because I've always assumed that the other drugs had those by law of some sort.
Well, they do. It is law. But when you go to a pharmacy, and if you ask the pharmacist for the product monograph, the product information, I'm willing to bet you won't be given a copy.
No, that's right. Interesting. Very interesting.
So one of the things that we've done, we've produced a new book last fall called A New Parent's Guide to Understanding Vaccination. And we have a section in there where we list the links so you can download all of the product monographs for every vaccine on the market. And we say to parents, read them, become familiar with them. We explain how you read a product monograph, what you should be looking for in there. Because with every pharmaceutical product, there's contraindications. There's people who should not take it. And if you don't know what that is, and the doctor isn't telling you, because they don't give you informed consent. They don't, I only really understood informed consent a few years ago when my elderly mother wanted to have open heart surgery. And she asked if I would go with her to the doctor for the consultation. And he took about half an hour to explain to her what the surgery was, what were the consequences, what was the likelihood of her surviving the surgery, what was the expected benefit. And he explained it all. And he said, there's a 10% chance you won't make it off the table. And then he said, I don't want your answer today. I want you to go home and sleep on it. I want you to talk to your family and then come back and give me your answer. And I thought, wow, that's the first time I've ever actually informed.
That's what it's supposed to look like.
Have you ever heard what are the risks of vaccination? Have you ever heard what the risk of mortality is? Yeah. I'm willing to bet nobody on your call has been given that information.
Well, in fact, it's frowned upon to suggest there might be a risk, which we know that's not true. Even if you could still be a very pro-vax while admitting the fact that there's risks to a drug, as Bumpy said. But the problem is our government and authorities, they aren't even admitting that, and that's. I find that far more problematic than a list of a few potential side effects. We brush past those all the time for every other drug.
So in Canada is one of the most egregious about vaccine injury. I don't know if you're aware, is that up until 2020, of the G20 nations, there was only 2 countries that didn't have a vaccine injury compensation program. Do you know what those 2 countries were?
I'm guessing Canada.
Canada and Russia.
Oh, really?
18 of the 20 G20 nations all had a vaccine injury compensation program. Some of them have been around for 40 and 50 years. Canada got its first vaccine injury compensation program in December of 2020 as they were trying to convince people to take the COVID jab. And basically the message was, well, if there is some harm, we'll cover you. And I want to say bullshit. Do you know anybody who was compensated for their injury from the COVID jab?
Just the VISP. No. You're talking about the vaccine injury. What is it? VISP that it stands for. Vaccine Injury
Program.
Yeah, compensation program. And there's so many reports of it that the money is all mismanaged. It's literally the management company of the program is banking all the cash. Like I've shared a video on here. It was even reported by either CTV or CBC was reporting on how it was almost impossible for people that had been declared vaccine injured to get compensation. It was a nightmare. Nobody was getting money. So, yeah.
Our problem is the culture in Canada is vaccines are safe and effective and necessary. Nobody gets injured. And even doctors have that mantra.
So you think that's a political choice, eh? That this vaccine injury fund, which does exist, because remember we did a piece on it where they paid a law firm $40 million to distribute it, and they haven't distributed any of it.
Yeah. Whereas in the United States, they've paid almost $6 billion in compensation for vaccine injury compensation since that program was established in 1989.
Wow.
The thing that bothers me the most about this, and we can stop it at that afterwards, but is one, you can't question it. You have to agree that it is safe and effective. You're not allowed to have informed consent. And all of those programs like the VISP are paid by the government, are paid with taxpayers' money.
Oh, that's
The pharmaceutical company, the vaccine companies are protected by the government, and that is both in Canada and the US. They cannot be sued. They cannot be held responsible for the side effect of their vaccine. Just that, those three things, the fact that I can't question, the fact that you keep on requiring me to have faith that it's safe and effective, and the fact that they cannot be held accountable for their product. What a great business model to have a protection to say you can produce those medication and you're protected.
Well, it can't be held liable. You don't have to admit the risks.
No.
Yeah. I mean, wow.
Nico, you're making a very good point. Vaccines are the only product on the market, the only product where the manufacturer is not liable for injury. And so with every other pharmaceutical, they're liable.
I mean,
if you're making a stroller or a crib or a car or whatever, you're liable if there's an injury.
Yeah.
If you're a vaccine manufacturer, get out of jail free.
Well, that itself is very suspicious. Very.
Sounds like a conspiracy theorist, Rob. Jeez.
Gee, I know. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I mean, you know, I've never claimed. I've certainly claimed that the conspiracy theorists, even though I don't consider myself one, they've certainly been proven right enough times lately that only a fool would immediately dismiss them. I mean, you know, we're talking here, like we're just talking about facts. 0.002% mortality rate is just, frankly, completely at odds with the narrative that we're told about the measles. And that number came from Wikipedia, who, again, if they were going to lie, it would be on the other end.
It would be there.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it wouldn't be on the end to make measles look less dangerous. It's
that is a great way to finish it right
there.
Yeah.
Collective sigh.
I want.
I just want to say, when you actually do your homework, it's hard not to be angry at the level of deception and the level of harm that's happening to our babies. And I mean, I'm seeing vaccine injury everywhere now, and it's, as a young father, Nico, it would break your heart if you, like it did mine, you take your baby with the best of intentions to the doctor, and the child you get that you bring home is not the same child. And that's what happened to me.
It's ridiculous, because that's one of the reasons why we're kind of trying to do more work together, Ted and I, because I'm literally going through it as we're talking right now. And we really want to target content towards families, like young families, so that they are informed. At least they realize the potential consequences of what they're doing to their children, and way plus and minuses, right? That's up to the parent. That's their job, but you want them to be informed. But what's interesting is going through it in Canada. Like my wife found out she was pregnant. We're still in Alabama. We found a midwife. Her questions were so simple. We'd go there. She's like, how you been eating? How you been sleeping? How you feeling? Are you stressed? Are you this? Are you that? We come to Canada. Within her first 3 questions, she asked, how much have you taken your COVID shot? Have you taken your, she mentioned 2 other vaccines. I can't remember. It was, she wanted her to take 3 vaccines as she's pregnant. And that's before asking her how she's been sleeping, how's her diet. And I'm just sitting there. We're looking at each other. We're like, yeah, that's going to be a problem. And luckily, the pediatric doctor that we have, because we've met her twice now, like we see her once a month just to make sure that he's okay. The first time we sat down, she started talking about vaccination. Both my wife and I are just looking at each other, and she's not an idiot. She read the room. She knew that we weren't interested at all. But she's like, you know what? I do suggest them, but I would never stop seeing a patient because they choose not to. So just that, I was like, thank God, at least we don't have to necessarily worry about stuff about that. But
yeah, that would be, you know, to feel shame. I think there was someone in the comments who, Anastasia, she said she went into hiding. Do you know how much shame healthcare in Alberta I got for not having the COVID shot? I have a kiddo that has CLD. bad lungs and they think I'm crazy for not getting the shots. Yeah, like it's fair play to recommend whatever you feel is medically sound advice as a doctor. But yeah, when you hear stories about doctors refusing to treat people, that's a problem. That's wrong. Shaming people, shaming your patients, that's wrong.
I lost my whole career over this, man. I'm a sales engineer by trade. I lost 20 years. Lost everything for not taking it. And it was a bunch of obese assholes that were telling me to take it for my health. I'm like, I train 10 times a week. I weigh my food. I have a six-pack. I'm 38 years old. Are you kidding me? You're going to tell me that I need to listen to you between 2 bites of McDonald's?
24-year-old HR exec with a 54 BMI.
Yeah.
Telling you that you're the health risk.
Yeah. Ted, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I don't know if you had any other question.
I had one last one. Yeah, I actually just one quick one for Ted, and feel free to answer as much or as little as you want, because
you don't know Ted very well.
I'm sure it could get personal, but you'd mentioned your son there. I was wondering if you could just kind of give us the backstory there, just as someone who's kind of curious about what we're actually talking about when we're talking about vaccine injuries.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Rob. My son Josh was damaged by his very first vaccine shot, which was the DPT shot. So that was the shot I mentioned in Africa was causing 5 times as many deaths as not being vaccinated. He immediately developed a seizure disorder, which was uncontrolled. We were in and out. I lived out of Vancouver Children's Hospital for the first 5 years of his life.
Wow.
Josh at one point was seizing 12 to 15 times a day, and each seizure was 15 to 20 minutes long. It was absolutely grueling. When Josh was 5, the chief neurologist took me aside one day and said, Mr. Kuntz, I'm going to ask you not to bring your son back to hospital any longer. He said, there's nothing else we can do for your son.
What? Wow. And just for the context, when you say immediately after, how soon after the shot are we talking that he displayed the first symptoms?
Well, he was immediately agitated. And what I often say is that the son we brought home was not the son we took to the doctor's office. And we immediately we went back to the doctors twice in the next 2 weeks and said, there's something wrong. This happy, content child that we had was sleeping well, eating well, is no longer any of those things. He's agitated, he's disturbed, he's not eating well, he's not sleeping well. Day 21, after the vaccine shot, he had his first ground mal seizure. It was 25 minutes long.
Wow.
I was in absolute shock. I had no idea what was happening to my son. Took him by ambulance to the hospital. They gave him a whole bunch of anti-seizure medication, said, treat your son as a normal child and everything will be fine. A month later, he seized again. A month later, he seized again. And then over time, the seizures increased in frequency until they were 12 to 15 times a day.
Wow.
And it was then when the doctor basically said, don't come back, I began to explore alternative healthcare. I had no idea about anything other than what you get at your doctor's office. I found a natural path. And the first thing she said to me, she said, you know, your son is vaccine injured. And I said, well, I've been saying that to Children's Hospital for 5 years, but they refused to listen to that. And she says, we have to detoxify the metals, heavy metals that's in his brain, first of all, and then build up his immune system. And so over a 3-year period, using natural medicine, she was able to reduce the amount of seizing from 12 to 15 times a day to 3 to 4 times a month, and from 15 to 20 minutes long to 30 seconds.
Wow.
And when I took him back to Children's Hospital at one point to show them how well he was doing, and I said to them, do you want to know what we've been doing? And they said, what? And I started to explain the protocols, the detoxification protocols, acupuncture, herbal remedies, homeopathic remedies. They immediately stopped me and said, we're not interested in that nonsense. You're wasting our time. And I said, you knew where my son was at when you told me not to come back, and you can see him today. Do you not think that the things that we're doing is making a difference? And you know what they said? He probably would have gotten better by himself. There was zero openness to understanding my son's medical condition and what made a difference. And that's when I realized how captured our healthcare system is in Canada.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure it's obviously got to be pretty personal for you, but Wow. Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. Do you mind asking if I mind me asking how is he doing now? Is he still?
He passed away in 2017.
Oh wow, I'm so sorry to hear that. Was that related, do you believe, to the vaccine itself?
Yeah, the coroner's assessment was he had a seizure and died in his sleep.
And the seizures were caused by the vaccine.
Yeah.
So yeah, wow. Wow, I appreciate you telling that story. I'm sure it can't be easy. But for someone, I'm sure there are people like myself who are just hearing this kind of stuff for the first time, and there is value in that.
And I appreciate you asking, and it's why I do this work. That's why I'm as passionate as it is. I don't want other parents to experience what Josh's mom and I experienced.
Wow. Well, Nico, did you have anything to add to that?
I brought Ted here for you, brother.
Yeah, no, that's definitely given me a lot to think about. I appreciate you taking the time, Ted. And I think from our audience, I can see here that they all really appreciate you taking the time as well.
Thank you both for inviting me and for having this conversation. It takes some courage to have it, and I appreciate both of you.
Thanks, Ted.
Always a pleasure, brother.
Thank you both.
Talk soon.
Have a great night, sir.